Hello and welcome back to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. I hope you're having a beautiful day today no matter what it is that you're doing. For our free wire tutorial today here on YouTube, I'd like to share a technique that I've been refining over the past 6 or 7 years in order to create very strong chain using wire only. Now whilst I can solder and have soldered and the pieces of jewellery are still going, it's certainly not an area that I would consider myself expert in, certainly not what I'm going to share with you on my channel. What I'd like to do is share a technique to create an infinity link chain, like this. I'll show you that on the board in just a moment ago. In terms of the history of the chain, I first thought about this in around 2014-2015 when I started working with wire. I was genuinely afraid of using a soldering torch, which is not a surprise given my track record of setting fire to myself and cutting fingers and things. This piece I made in 2017 and it managed to snaffle me tickets to go to the UK premiere of the film Logan, starring Sir Patrick Stewart, Hugh Jackman and many more wonderful people. So the chain is an infinity link. This piece is made in very heavy, it's 14 gauge or 1.5mm copper. I'm going to show you the technique in 1mm or 18 gauge copper sections today. It still creates a lovely and strong chain, and once you've mastered the technique in a lighter wire, you can absolutely move up to a heavier gauge. So I have a length which is just chain, like so. And I've created a little J-hook on the end, and I'll show you how to do that as a little supplement for today. That's what we're looking to create, a lovely little chain. But what you can also use it to do is add into your bar bracelets, bar necklaces if you wanted to create a bit of a choker with it. It's actually quite comfortable against the skin. So you can just, this one's got 3 links on one side and 4 links on the other side, so you can make smaller lengths of chain. Or you could add it to a bar of textured and stamped copper, entirely up to you. I'm going to show you those pieces on the board now a little bit more closely, and then we'll crack on with what is truly a beginner's level wire chain technique. So this again is a piece made in very heavy wire. This is 1.5mm or 14 gauge. This was mildly hammered because it's a very heavy wire and it deserves it. The J-hook on the end was indeed also hammered. Textured piece of hand cut copper, which was then aged, patinaed and then sealed, so that's one of those to look at. You can also use it as an extender chain if you're making completely handmade jewellery. Sometimes you don't want to add in pre-made chain, so it's a nice way to add a little bit of detail to a bar bracelet. It is very, very strong, even though this is only made with your 1mm gauge. Or you can simply make a chain. Now, because of the size of the loops on my infinity chain, it's infinitely adjustable to the wearer. You can make it super long, and then people could cut off what they don't want to use, or they could simply pop the J-hook through any one of those links to suit their individual wrist. So as I mentioned before, the only wire we're going to be using today is 1mm gauge. Once you get the hang of the technique, you can absolutely up that to a slightly stronger gauge. My pliers today are flush cutters to get a really nice end on the wire, and also these dual-sided bail makers. Now these are 4 and 6mm. The size I'm going to be using is the 6mm size. Any round form that has that kind of size nature would be perfect for the design. So I have a huge amount of lengths cut because I love making this chain. It's very, very mindful. And they're all in the region of 2.5 inches in length. They do benefit from just a little bit of warmth, especially in that middle section. And there is basically one technique, which is why I love this design. It's super accessible. So we're going to be utilising the 6mm size of my bail makers. And I'm going to start off by creating what looks a bit like a skew-if wrapped loop preparation. I need slightly more wire on the end than that, so I'm going to pop that back in and draw it around. Now as we look at it right now, the tail of the wire on the short end is travelling over the top of the main form. So when I bring the wire around on the other side to create what looks for all the world like a little ampersand, I want that tail of wire to go underneath. So one tail goes over the top, one goes underneath. So I'm rotating that around, and then I'm drawing the tail underneath, so that what you're looking at is this kind of weird ampersand shape. Now you can see there's a gap between those two tails at the moment. I don't want a gap there. I want them to be very, very close indeed. So I'm just going to take that round a little bit further. until they sit side by side. If you wanted to add this into a bar section, and this is your first link, we're just very simply going to add that section on before we move on to the next part, which is to grip the round form on the side we're closing off first. And what we're going to do is push that tail over the top and all the way around the back. Now that needs to sit parallel to where it's come from. So the wire has travelled around in an 8 shape or an infinity shape, all the way across, and it's gone underneath the central section, travelled over the top and back on itself. Now I'll try to zoom in, I'll try and keep as still as possible for this. What we need to do is trim this, just the tail section, none of the other bits of wire, so make sure that you're canny with your trimming. And just to close that up, you might want to use your chain nose pliers just to draw that down slightly. So you can see we've folded the end over the centre section. If I flip this over to the other side, we're going to do the exact same thing but in reverse. I'm going to add in my chain nose or bent chain nose pliers again and fold that over with a tool just in case you wanted to use one. Give that a bit of a squash to get it nice and flat. And then you can see we do need to trim just a tiny amount on this side as well. So again, we're just trimming the one little bit away, not anywhere that we're not supposed to be trimming. Do look twice. Now to tighten this up, what I'm going to do is again use those bent chain nose pliers and apply just a tiny bit of pressure across the centre of that infinity or 8 shape. And then I'm going to do the same between the 2 loops, like so. So everything is neatly squished together before giving that a lovely gentle squeeze. So I'm hopeful that you've all got chain nose pliers, and nice cutters really do help. Now it does pay to take a couple of moments just to make sure that those 2 end sections of wire are nice and neat and tidy. Now I'm always telling you to never squash down on wire where it crosses over. Well, today is the exception. We're going to give that a bit of a squish, and then we're going to very firmly press down. If you need to, you can use the desk like so to apply a little bit extra pressure. It's because you've got sections of wire crossing over the top that are supported in 2 positions. So we're not weakening the centre of that infinity or 8 segment. We're flattening down the whole design so that when it's worn it is comfortable. I am going to show you that again with another piece of wire, which obviously will be connected into the first, but you won't have this bit interfering with your vision again. It does make up really quite quickly, and it is, as I say, a beginner's accessible piece. So we're going to rotate the wire around until we get a short tail crossing over. If I remove the pliers, you'll be able to see that. And then in the opposite direction, so the wire that is the short end here has crossed underneath. That means that the tail on the other side needs to go over the top. Doesn't matter which way round you do it, as long as they're on opposing sides. So rotating those pliers around, those bail makers, and getting that to sit side by side so that you've created an infinity loop or a little 8 shape. We're going to take one of those shorter tails, pop it onto the chain we've already started creating, and then you can either by hand fold the short ends over. Let me just grab a pair of pliers. So the wire travels over the top of the central section, all the way around the loop, and then you've got a cut end. The cut end needs to fold around the central section and go back on itself. So if I show you that from underneath this time, you can use your bent chain nose pliers instead of your hands. You'll certainly need to do that when you up your game and use heavier wire. So I'm just going to fold that into position, and you can see how the short tail that we haven't cut sits currently side by side with the what will be cut, although to be fair I don't think I need to cut that side. Quick flip over, pinch firmly on the O shape or use a supplementary pair of pliers, bring that tail back and across, and it sits side by side with the other circular form. Just give that a quick trim. Trying to cut it and missing is far better than trying to cut it and cutting the wrong section. So before we give it a squish, we need to tidy everything up. So we're definitely making sure that those 2 ends are sitting where we want them to. Actually, I might just take a tiniest shave off this end. I'm only putting my thumb over it when I cut it, not to hide the cutting from you, but to protect my eyes. So again, I'm just going to very gently coerce everything to sit as neatly as I possibly can from either side of the waist of that 8 or infinity shape, and then from the top and bottom. I'm then going to twist so that they sit completely flat, and then I'm going to squish the whole thing together. I'm making sure that everything is 100% as I want it before I make that final hard push. Now, if you wanted to, when you take that up to a heavier gauge wire, you absolutely can go for a gentle hammering around the crossover section, but you can also go for a slightly more vigorous hammering. And the way in which you will do that is to take the chain, separate it like so. You're not removing the link, but you're holding the links out of the way. Let me just see if I've got a frame here. I don't have my little block to hand. So you put the block underneath, and then you'd hammer just around the circular section, not on top of any of the links. And you can do that with each link as you go. So you can just pull the links out of the way one by one until you've hammered the arcing section of each of those infinity links. I'm going to show you one more very, very quickly before we move on to the next section. So rotate those bail making pliers around, and again these are 6mm. So I've created my first loop. Now normally when we're making a wrapped loop we get an angle in here so that that circular form sat on a straight line. We're not doing that today because we want that central sweep to be beautiful and straight. So again, the cut end is over the top on this end. So that means when I rotate those pliers around, I want the tail to go underneath. So if I remove the pliers, you've got that infinity or ampersand shape going on. You might need to just play with that to make sure it sits a little bit more perfectly. And I'm going to link into the next section of chain like so. And it does build up really very, very quickly. So you can take the tail over by hand if you want to. You can certainly do that with this 1mm gauge wire. Let me just flip this over on the other side. Grab a hold of that loop, and then you can take the second tail over. What you might find is if you've got a longer tail sticking out, you may want to trim that first. Now this is the stage at which it's very easy to cut the wrong section. So my advice would be to take that second crossover that we haven't completed yet, push it down out of the way before you contemplate any trimming. It's a bit sad, it's only a small amount of wire, it's only 2.5 inches of wire at a time, but if you don't need to remake it, why would you? So again, I'm going to support the unfinished loop, push the end over, just very, very gently coerce that down before I decide if any needs trimming. Take my flush cutters into position, get that cut section out of the way, and again you can go from loop to loop and from either side of the waist of the 8 before you give that a squish. If you are going to hammer, please be gentle. Please be gentle. Going to give it a squeeze. That's actually quite a strong piece of chain already. For the last stage of our tutorial today, I'm going to show you how to make one of the world's quickest clasps. It's a J-hook and it works beautifully with this infinity chain because it will fit into almost any aperture along the length of the chain. Hence, you can sell pieces of jewellery which are made for one and all. So that would be a good size for me. Couple of inches on the end, and it makes it super multi-purpose. People can either trim away the excess with any pair of cutters, just open up that one of those infinity links, or you can just have a bit dangling down like I do with my Logan bracelet. When I wear that, there's a lot of excess that hangs down. I don't mind it. It's not great if you're doing busy things, but if you're just going out for a lovely lunch and you can have a bracelet that hangs down, it's one of those. So to make my J-hook, I've got just a slightly longer length of wire now. It's the same gauge, although for pieces like this, I tend to try and go up a gauge if I can from the rest of the design. So if you make the infinity chain in your 18 gauge 1mm, if you can, try to get a piece of 1.25mm or 16 gauge to make the clasp. It just makes it slightly more longer lasting. I'm going to trim the very end so that it's flush. So again, it's about 3 inches of wire. So what we're going to do is start at this end of the design. With our round nose pliers, we're going to make a very, very tiny loop. And I'm pulling down with my non-dominant hand in this direction whilst I create the essence of a loop. It doesn't need to be a round one. You can see that that's just still slightly open. So what I'm going to do is pinch that and just close it up just a little bit so that it's a little bit smaller than I could have made it. So I'm just pushing that until it's closed up. I'm going to use those same bail making pliers again because I like the fact that the loop that you create for each of the infinity links is then the same size approximately as your J hook. So I'm going to pop the coil shape or the loop shape that we've made facing downwards towards the table, and I'm putting the round form that I'm using, in this case the 6mm side of my bail making pliers, and I'm just going to rotate that around until it hits that small loop shape that we made, like so. So it's like a shepherd's crook at the moment. You can make that tail slightly shorter if you wish to. I'm just trying to demonstrate in a way that it's easy to see. So once you're happy with the roundness of your shape in the J hook, we're going to create an angle. If I pop that down on the table, so it continues straight along through the centre of the circular part of that form. What I'm going to do now is give that a bit of work hardening, because I'm working here with 1mm or 18 gauge, and I'd really prefer to take it up a level to 1.25mm or 16 gauge. I'm going to give that some work hardening. Now if you choose to hammer, don't hammer past this angle, just hammer the form itself. You can hammer that end section. Let me just bring the Logan one in, and you can see if you take a very much heavier wire how much flattening you can go for. So I absolutely smashed this because I wanted it to last forever, and I've worn it quite a lot since 2017 when I made it. So just goes to show, if you use a heavier, this is 14 gauge or 1.5mm, they do last a very, very long time. So apply your work hardening however you plan to do that, whether it be open and close nom-nomming with your flat facing pliers. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put a sideways bend approximately the same distance on the long tail as where the first loop form is. So we've made a little sideways bend. We're now going to use those round nose pliers and create a wrapped loop here. So I'm taking the tail all the way across, and if I just show you the form, we've got the J kind of shape on this side, and then the loop is in opposition to it. So I'm going to address the end of the chain that we've made and attach in the J hook we're creating together, like so, and then it's just a wrapped loop. So I'm very gently going to open that out ever so slightly before I pop in with my bent chain nose pliers to hold that and just take the tail around. Now obviously with the camera there it's a little bit trickier to show you, but all we're doing is a wrapped loop. I'm just going to coerce the wire to go inside like so, and then once you've neatened that up like so, you can trim the end away and give it a bit of a smooth down. So I'm just going to trim that, take that out of the way, and then get that nice and smooth so that it doesn't interact with your skin. A bit of a squish and a squeeze, bit of a squish and a squeeze, and that's 1/2 of a bar bracelet complete with handmade chain. So I hope that you've enjoyed the infinity chain as much as I have. I've got lots of happy memories of going to see Logan with my friend Karen down in Leicester Square in London at the premiere. And yeah, there's your infinity link chain. I hope you love it as much as I do. I do feel that it is accessible to beginners. Let me know how you get on, and I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon here on the Gemhawks YouTube channel, or over on my Facebook page, which is Gemhawks and Gems Gembox. All of my socials are listed down underneath the video, or if they're not there, they'll be on the site somewhere. Genuinely don't know. Have a beautiful day. Bye for now.